Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, what is emotional abuse? I'm just going to refer to this as EA. And when can it be classified as narcissistic abuse? I've also been asked, what are the similarities and differences, and are there gender differences? So first I'll talk about EA, and then I'll talk about the gender differences, and then I'll get into the narcissistic component. So EA is when non-physical actions are perceived by a victim as having a harmful impact. Now, strictly speaking, EA does not have to be intentional, but most of the time we kind of think of it as being something that's intentional, or at least as having some intentional component to it. And we know that emotional abuse is often a predictor of physical abuse. I'll refer to physical abuse as PA. So EA is harder to define than PA because it lacks the physical parameters. So it's just easier to figure out when PA is occurring. And also we see that EA is often studied along with PA. So again, determining the consequences of just the emotional abuse component can be really difficult. When constructs are studied together, it's sometimes hard to kind of separate them out. EA can be expressed through a range of aversive behaviors that cause harm to an individual, like coercion, control, monitoring. This is like watching somebody or checking up on them. Verbal abuse, isolation, threatening, manifesting jealousy-type behaviors, humiliation, manipulation, treating another person as if they're inferior, withholding emotionally or physically from a partner, and engaging in sadistic acts. There's actually a number of other items that could qualify as emotional abuse as well, but those are just some of them. Now, we see a lot of mental health outcomes when we study EA. We know that EA tends to erode somebody's self-esteem, it creates self-doubt, and it can cause an increase in somebody's passive behaviors. So it can increase passivity. Now, there's some controversy in terms of what mental health outcome is most prevalent. And really, if you look at the leading theories, it would be between anxiety and depression. So some say anxiety, and they theorize EA leads to anxiety because of the fear created with emotional abuse. And others say depression. So it's hard to know, but we know that both are fairly common outcomes of being emotionally abused. Now, interestingly, if we look at other consequences of EA, we see physical health symptoms like somatization and chronic pain. So what gender differences do we see with emotional abuse? Well, there are actually quite a few gender differences, and I gained a lot of this information from one particular article, but I'll put the references to all the articles I used for this video in the description for this video. But in this one study, we see that females are more likely to report that a partner engaged in threatening behaviors intended to frighten them, and to make them feel inferior by establishing authority over them. Males are more likely to report that a partner engaged in behaviors intended to make them feel badly about their attractiveness, behaviors designed to check up on them, so that monitoring behavior I talked about before, and behaviors designed to make choices for them. Now, when compared to males' reports of their own behaviors, females reported they were more likely to engage in behaviors aimed at checking up on their partner, manipulative behaviors designed to get what they wanted, and acting jealous of other potential romantic partners. Also in the study, we see that males concurred that they were more likely than females to engage in behaviors designed to make their partners feel inferior by establishing authority over them, but also admitted to showing interest in alternative romantic partners in order to make their partners feel insecure. So kind of overall, females perceived themselves as engaging in manipulative and monitoring behaviors to get what they want, and males perceived themselves as engaging in behaviors to gain power by treating their partner as inferior. Now, both genders reported that females experience more negative emotional impact from emotional abuse. So that's one area of agreement when we look at the genders in terms of EA. So moving on to the narcissism component. When can EA be classified as narcissistic abuse? Well, both of these constructs are real, but the terminology can be confusing. Emotional, as it's used in the term emotional abuse, really indicates the mode or type of transmission. So someone can hurt you emotionally, but they can't hurt you narcissistically, because they can't hurt your narcissism. Narcissism is a set of traits. So someone can hurt your feelings, our perception of emotions, but they can't hurt your traits. Someone can't hurt someone else's arrogance or jealousy, just like they can't hurt someone else's friendliness, creativity, or conscientiousness. So when we use the term narcissistic abuse, we're really talking about the characteristics of the offender, not the characteristics of the abuse. The traits of the offender are manipulative, controlling, jealous, arrogant, having a lack of empathy. The application of those traits is emotional abuse. But often it's just referred to as narcissistic abuse so as to explain the nature of the offender. So narcissistic abuse communicates that emotional abuse occurred and that someone narcissistic was the perpetrator. So really, the term narcissistic abuse just saves time. It just explains a little bit more than the term emotional abuse. The strong association between EA and narcissism really led to the term narcissistic abuse. I suppose it's more accurately described as the emotional abuse typically perpetrated by someone who's narcissistic. But that's kind of a hard thing to say every time you want to refer to this construct. So again, really just a time saver here. Another important point here, someone who's narcissistic can also be physically violent. So from a clinical point of view, so for mental health clinicians, don't forget to ask about the physical in addition to the emotional. Just because somebody says the term narcissistic abuse, that doesn't restrict it to the realm of the emotional. So I know whenever I talk about these different topics like emotional abuse and narcissistic abuse, there are going to be a variety of opinions, people who agree and disagree with me. Please put those thoughts in the comments section. They always generate a really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of emotional abuse and narcissism to be interesting. Thanks for watching.